Chess YouTube, Gukesh D just faced off versus Fabiano Caruana in round number 4 of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament, and this game was insane. Gukesh busting out a relatively rare idea in the opening phase of the game to try and catch Fabiano off guard, and from there, the game was just truly insane. I mean, Gukesh busting out so many unique ideas in the opening these days. All right. In the game, Gukesh playing as white, opens 1 d4, then Fabiano Caruana, d5. Then we have c4, and then e6. We have the good old-fashioned queen's gambit decline on the board. The point being white goes c4, heading for the queen's gambit, and black goes e6, declining the temporarily sacrificed pawn on c4. Now, here, white has a wide variety of ways to continue. The main moves are knight to c3, potentially heading for an exchange variation by taking on d5, and the move knight f3. And this was played in the game by Gukesh. Now here, Fabiano, knight f6, and now, of course, knight c3 and g3 are the main moves for white, and Gukesh plays quite a bit of both of these moves, and in the game, he plays the move knight to c3, heading for the 3 knights variation of the QGD, named after the 3 knights on the board right here, and this really is one of the biggest, most important, and most theoretical positions in all of chess, because black has so many ideas here. Now, Fabiano Caruana, he's playing as black. Here, in this position, lately, he's been playing a lot of my personal favorite move as black. That is the move bishop b4, heading for the Rogozin variation. Now, instead of that, in this game, he plays the move c6. And this move here, it is the defining move of the Semi-Slav variation of the QGT. And the Semi-Slav used to be all the rage in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. I mean, Vishy and Nod and many other players played this opening all the time as black. It's not quite as common these days, but it's still one of black's absolute main lines in the QGD and against 1d4 in general. Now, black's idea is pretty simple. He's threatening to capture on c4 with this pawn and then go b5, trying to hang on to the extra pawn. This is kind of the main idea in almost every major line of the Semi-Slav. So what does Gukesh want to do about it? Well, white has maybe 3 main ideas here. Bishop g5 is the old main line, but e3 and g3 are also super common. All right, in the game, Gukesh, he plays e3. So far, this is very, very standard stuff. White's idea, he defends c4. That way, if black takes on c4, he recaptures with the bishop. Now, the drawback of this move, and it is a big drawback, the bishop on c1 is now trapped inside the pawn chain, and that officially makes this a quote-unquote bad bishop, as the bishop here is on the same color as these pawns, and it really doesn't have a whole lot of scope for activity, at least in the short term. Now here, black, Fabiano, he plays the main move in the Semi-Slav, that is knight b to d7. This is just the best square for the knight in almost every one of these lines. Now here, the 2 main moves for white are bishop d3, the Moran variation, and queen to c2, the anti-Moran. Don't worry about why white plays these moves. The point is, those are the 2 top moves. But here, Gukesh, he plays a move that I have personally never seen played at the highest level, at the Super GM territory. He plays this move h3. Okay, what the heck is going on? White here is not fighting for the center at all. He's not developing. He's playing kind of this quiet waiting move. And I first saw the idea of this move played by Ding Liren in the 2022 World Championship match versus the Russian Grandmaster Jan Nepomniachtchi. And in this position right here, we had this same position earlier in this game. In this position in the World Championship match, Ding Liren played the move h3 in their first game. And it was a really, really weird looking idea back then. And to be honest, this move here by Gukesh D, h3, in this position, it looks equally weird to me. But of course, Gukesh being the world champion, this is all home preparation. He knows what he's doing. Let's see the idea in action. All right, Fabiano, he continues. Bishop d6, completely unfazed. This is by far the best square for the bishop in this particular line. Now here, Gukesh, he plays the move bishop d3, heading for some sort of delayed Moran variation. Now black takes on c4, d takes c4. Of course, the idea behind waiting until white goes bishop d3 before taking on c4 is obvious. By waiting for this move, after black takes on c4, black forces this bishop to move again to c4 in 2 moves, to d3 and then c4. So white is sort of losing a tempo in this line. Now here black goes b5, drives back the bishop. We have bishop d3. And now here, the standard plan for black would include ideas like bishop b7, a6, c5, castles, and so on. But instead, Fabiano Caruana, he brings the fight to Gukesh already on move 9. He plays the move b4, attacking the knight on c3. Now, this knight has many squares it can go to. It can go to a4, e4, and e2. And it turns out all of these squares, all of these moves for white are actually pretty playable. So which one does Gukesh want to do? Well, in the game, he plays knight to e2, retreating back to the center and staying very, very safe and avoiding exchanges. If it went to, say, e4, black could trade on e4, trying to simplify. So this move, knight e2, maybe he intends knight g3, maybe, or perhaps it'll stay here, and from there, white's going to go something like e4, e5. We'll have to wait and see, but overall, a very interesting move that maintains all the tension in the position. All right, now black. c5 is the move, the standard counterattacking idea for black in almost every single QGD line, Queen's Gambit Decline line. Of course, the idea is by going c5, you're challenging white's pawn on d4, and if these pawns get liquidated, black will be doing excellent. But here, Gukesh, he ignores the tension created by this move, and instead, he goes for it in the center immediately with the move e4. I mean, this is why we love Gukesh here. He's threatening e5, threatening to fork the bishop and the knight, and Fabiano Caruana already on move 11. He's got to find a concrete response to these problems. Well, in the game, he takes on d4. This is a strong move, the point being, now, if you go e5, that pawn on e5 will not be supported by a pawn on d4, and therefore black could capture it outright, and he would be okay. So here, Gukesh, he's forced to respond accordingly. He takes on d4 with the e knight. Knight e takes d4, taking and developing, and now both sides castle, castles and castles. And here, this is sort of the start of the middle game. Both sides have castled. Yes, both sides have not fully completed development yet, but they're going to very, very soon. White's likely going to go, say, bishop to d2 or g5, and then rook c1, and black's likely to go, say, bishop b7, rook c8, and both sides will be completing development. So, what is going on here? Well, there is this imbalance of the pawns on e4 and e5. If black doesn't act soon, white is going to go, say, queen to e2 or rook to e1, threatening e5, and that would be very dangerous. So with that in mind here, Fabiano, he goes e5 himself, closing down the center of the board. Now here, Gukesh, knight to f5 is the move. And this knight on the f5 square, Garry Kasparov, maybe the second best chess player of all time, once said, the knight on f5 is worth at least a pawn. And that is certainly true here. This knight on f5 is just a monster. It threatens the bishop. It threatens g7. It threatens future knight to h6 ideas, and so on. So what is black going to do about it? Well, Fabiano, again, being one of the best players in the world since literally forever, he goes knight c5. Just ignores the attack on the bishop and instead counterattacks on white's bishop. Now Gukesh, he takes on d6. Black takes back. And then we have bishop c4. Now, this move may look a little bit dry, a little bit boring, kind of like, you know, some chicken breast with no seasoning on it. Just not much there, right? No spice, no flavor. But the reason he did this, if black trades queens, if black goes for the easy way out, white takes back with the rook, and suddenly, white's going to have actually a pretty big lead in development. And beyond that, he's also going to have those two Bs on c4 and c1, and that would give Gukesh a huge edge in the endgame. So here, Fabiano, the pressure is on him to find some way to avoid that dry endgame where he's just worse. So what will he do? Well, the drawback of this move, of course, is the pawn on e4 is now undefended, and black can take this pawn. However, that would lead to massive complications. But Fabiano, he's ready for a fight. He takes on e4. Here we go. Gukesh, bishop to e3. Again, maintaining all the tension, and Fabiano finally, queen to e7, retreats the queen. Now, what is going on here? Gukesh, he's given up a pawn. Black has the extra pawn on e5, and it is, for now, very well supported. There's only one attacker and one defender. Therefore, the pawn will live. However, Gukesh has these two monstrous bishops and very good development. So what can he do with those two Bs? Let's find out. Rook to C1. He develops the rook. Now Fabiano, bishop B7, activating his bishop to the standard square in the Semi-Slav. And that bishop is just a monster on this diagonal. But don't worry, despite being down a pawn, Gukesh here, according to the engine, has at least equal chances. All right, Gukesh, queen to B3, activating the bishop, pressuring F7, and the pawn on B4. How will black respond? He's going to go A5, defending the pawn on B4 with the pawn, but now white goes A3 as well, also pressuring B4, increasing the tension on the queen side. Now, Fabiano, knight D6. He retreats the knight back, pressures the bishop on C4, and also threatens ideas like E4, or even better, bishop takes F3, ruining white's pawn structure. So, a very simple move, knight to D6, with many threats, and if I can draw arrows correctly, ideas here. So how will white respond? Well, he finds maybe the only move to defend against everything, that is bishop to E2. The bishop gets out of the way of the attack and defends the knight on the F3 square. But now black, bishop D5, attacks the queen. Where will the queen go? It goes to the A4 square. Okay, it gets out of the attack, but now Fabiano, rook F to B8. These two rooks on A8 and B8, believe it or not, despite being stuck on the edge of the board, they are perfectly placed, as this is where all of the action's happening. The rook on A8 lining up with the queen, the other rook lining up on potentially the soon-to-be open B file. I mean, black here, he's up the pawn, he's got the active rooks, he's got the conglomerate of pieces in the center here. I mean, look at that blob of pieces controlling the center. Black here is playing just immaculately so far. But again, Gukesh, the world champion, with those two Bs, you can't count him out either. He goes bishop C5, forking the queen, the knight here, pinning it to the queen, and also pressuring B4. Now, black, queen to E6. He steps out of the pin of the knight. Now the knight is free to move anywhere it wants once again. But here, Gukesh, knight G5, continues to be annoying, pressures the queen on the E6 square. Where is the queen going to go? It goes to F5, attacks the knight, and now Gukesh drops back, knight to F3. Now, with this move, Gukesh here is offering a draw effectively. If black goes back to E6 with the queen, white goes knight G5, black goes queen to F5, white goes knight F3, and so on, and it would be a draw. Both sides go back and forth, and the game ends in a draw. But instead, here, Fabiano, he shows he is out for blood in this classical game. He goes knight D to E4, jumping in with the knight, pressuring the bishop. What's going to happen from here? Gukesh, bishop B3. Then we have queen to E6, dropping back. And now queen to C2. Now rook C8, pressures the queen. Both sides kind of playing this weird game of chicken, just attacking back and forth, queen to A4, rook C to B8, queen to C2. Now, rook C8 would lead to a draw again with these moves going back and forth. So instead, Fabiano again, H6, guarding G5, stopping knight G5 ideas. Again, Fabiano showing he's out for blood in this game. Now, Gukesh, bishop C4, offering the trade of those two Bs. But here, Fabiano, knight D6, again, playing on maintaining the tension. Now here, Gukesh trades on D5, black takes back, and then bishop to D2, trying to maintain this bishop and pressuring the pawn on B4. Now, the threat could be A takes B4, and then later trying to win this pawn on B4. However, for now, the pawn is defended, and here, Fabiano, he plays the move rook to C8, pressuring the queen yet again. Now, where is the queen going to go? It's going to B3, pressuring the knight, pressuring the queen behind the knight. What will black do? We have knight to E4. The knight jumps in. Then we have A takes B4, A takes, and then bishop to E3. A very interesting move here, Gukesh. He's giving black the option of trading on F3 like this, but will he go for it? The point is, if you trade here, white can actually trade on E6, damaging black's pawn structure, then take back, and these double pawns would be super weak in the endgame, and white would have decent drawing chances. So instead, Fabiano, knight E to F6 is the move, defending D5, dropping back, maintaining the good position of the queen and the knight. Now we have rook F to E1, then rook takes C1, bishop takes C1, And then e4, gaining space again and pressuring this weak knight on the f3 square. Now we have knight d4. The knight jumps up, pressures the queen on e6. Then queen to e5. The queen steps up, pressures the knight on d4. Now we have queen to c4, queen to e8. It drops back, knight to f5, rook to c8. Hits the queen on the c4 square. So far, so good. Then queen to d4. The queen slides over, queen to e6, knight to g3. And then b3. Black here trying to lock down the queen side, trying to fix this pawn on b2 on the same color as the bishop. And again, Fabiano doing everything he possibly can in the game to pressure the white position. But here, Gukesh, again, he shows he's ready for a fight. He plays the move f3, the point being exposing the x-ray attack of the rook on the queen. Now, if black takes on f3, obviously, he loses the queen on the spot. You can't allow that. Therefore, here, Fabiano, he plays a different idea. Rook to c2, flying in with the rook, pressuring b2, and very importantly, pressuring g2. This is the square that f3 left behind. With the pawn on f2, the rook on c2 would only be hitting f2, but now after f3, the square g2 is vulnerable as well, and that is a huge, huge detail. For example, if black ever gets a knight on, say, e3 or f4, that would also pressure this square here. All right, Gukesh, he takes on e4. F takes e4. We have knight to e7. The knight drops back. Then rook to f1. The rook slides over. Knight c6 hits the queen on d4. Where's the queen going to go? It goes back to e3, queen to e3, king to h7, rook to f2, offering the rook trade. Will black go for it? Well, he's going to go queen to e5, simply maintaining the tension here, pressuring g3, pressuring b2, and so on. Of course, if white takes on c2, black takes back with the the b pawn, and gets the new c pawn on c2, and that pawn would be super, super dangerous. All right, here, Gukesh. He's played such a good defensive game the last 10-20 moves, but here, he makes a big mistake. He plays the move queen to f4, offering the queen trade. What is the problem with this move? Well, it turns out queen to d4, pinning the rook on f2 to the king, would be incredibly strong. So, here, in this position, Fabiano, will he find queen d4? It turns out he will not. Instead, he takes on f4, white takes back, and then we have knight to b4. The knight jumps in on the b4 square. Now, rook d2. The point being, if you take, the bishop recaptures, and white will be doing okay. Now we have h5, gaining space. h4, the alpha 0 pawns touching on the king side. Then knight g4, capitalizing on the weakness of g4. Of course, that is the space left behind by the move h4 by white. Now, king to f1. The king enters the game. Rook c1, king to e2. And here, Fabiano, he's played so well the last several moves. All he has to do is find this one move, rook to b1, to maintain the tension here. But instead, he goes rook g2, and this move looks so obvious. The pawn on g2 is under attack. Black could win it with check, hitting the king. But for some reason, I can't quite work it out. For some reason, this is not the way forward, and it lets Gukesh back into the game completely. White here takes on h5. Knight takes h5. Black takes the g2 pawn. Rook takes g2. Now we have king to f3, offering the rook trade. Here, black can take on d2, but white will take back, and white will have some pressure on the knight on b4. And that is what happens. Rook takes d2. Bishop takes d2. The knight is under attack. Where will the knight go? The knight goes to the e5 square. Knight e5. The other knight jumps back, pressures the king. Now we have king to e2 and knight b to c6. Now here, this endgame is just completely equal. Technically, white may have the slightly better minor pieces, those being the bishop and the knight. The bishop here, because there's pawns on both sides of the board, the bishop is a little bit better than either of these knights. However, black also has the better pawn structure. White's pawns on e4 and h4 in particular are very weak and targetable. So overall, the superior minor piece is offset by the slightly weaker pawn structure, and it's really anyone's game in this endgame. All right, we have bishop c3, targeting e5, defending b2. Very good multi-purpose move. Now f6 defends the knight. Ben Feingold rolling in his grave right now. He's alive, but you know the saying. Yeah, he would not be happy with that move. All right. knight to f4, the knight drops back, king to h6, knight to e6, the knight jumps in and pressures g7 in certain lines. Now knight d7, king to d3, knight d to e5, hits the king to e2, knight d7, and here, white could go for a draw with, say, king d3, knight e5, king to e2, knight to d7, but instead, king to e3, the king jumps up. Gukesh, again, playing for a win. All right, knight c to e5, king e2, g6, knight f4, and now knight to c5, pressuring e5, pressuring, defending b3, sorry. Black getting a little pressure. We have king e3 defending, knight to a4, attacks the bishop and the pawn on b2. Now, finally, Gukesh, he finally trades the minor pieces. We have bishop takes, f takes, and then knight to d3, defending b2 with the knight. Now here, king h5, knight takes e5, Gukesh going for it, giving up b2, giving up h4. We have knight takes b2, king d2, knight a4, king d3, king h6, knight f3, knight c5, hits the king and e4. King to c3, the knight takes, the king takes g5, and from here, white takes, black takes, and there simply isn't enough material to win the game, meaning the game ends in a draw. Wow, what a fascinating game between Gukesh and Fabiano. I mean, Gukesh, he always finds some way to surprise me in the opening, this time with the very subtle move h3 that, again, I first saw Ding Liren play in his World Championship match versus Jan Nepomniachtchi. And here, Gukesh busting out this h3 idea in a completely different position and showing that this move's actually quite venomous if black doesn't know what he's doing. But of course, Fabiano, he played flawlessly in the opening. It didn't quite work out the way he wanted to, but I love the idea. Gukesh showing why he's such a dangerous player at the chessboard, especially with the white pieces. All right, Chess YouTube, that is all for this video right here. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, please smash that like button, comment down below, say anything you want. Just, just type in a big G, capital G for Gukesh. Show your support for Gukesh. Type a capital G, whatever you want. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.